Let's move on to the render settings. Let's create a camera. Let's put it a little bit on top. In this scene, I'm not going to use light since I'll be using emission. Let's create the material. Let's remove the standard material and create incandescent. Plug it into the surface. And create RS point attribute with attribute CD and connect in color. Assign the material to particles. Enable render objects as particles, otherwise we won't see anything on the render. Go to Redshift Render View. And click Render. Now the scale of the particles is very large, so let's create a random p-scale attribute with randomize. Create an attribute randomize, set the p-scale, and set the minimum and maximum values. We'll make the global scale smaller. Okay, good. Now let's add some particle flickers. Create a point VOP. Create, for example, a flow noise. Make a random from ID and plug it into noise position. And now we need to multiply the noise by the color. But first, let's plug it into CD to see how it looks. Let's make a time shift to make it easier to adjust and estimate the flicker rate. Let's increase the frequency. And now to make the animation, let's make a flow attribute. And let's write an expression to make the animation depend on time. Let's increase the frequency some more. We can also increase amplitude and rueness. And now let's multiply the result by the color. And let's make a fit range to adjust the minimum values. And now let's add some contrast to the color. Let's create an attribute wrangle and write an expression like this. So I'm going to multiply the current color values by 1.5 and multiply it by 5, for example, to make it even brighter. Let's compare it to the previous version. Yes, it's much brighter. Okay, and let's make some particles much brighter and more saturated. Copy attribute wrangle and add on top. If random from ID, multiply by some seed less than threshold, then do the same action. Move the threshold and see how the particles light up. See how it looks on the renderer. You can even make these particles even brighter. Multiply by 15 and increase the threshold. Look at the rendering. Yeah, that's great. Let's compare it to the previous version. We can see that some of the particles are much brighter. Now let's set up the camera. Like this, let's switch on bokeh. Disable use Houdini camera focus so that we can adjust the focus distance here. Adjust the focus distance so that the focus point is somewhere in the middle of the frame. Adjust aperture. You can also add spherical aberration so that the particles are blurred in this way. And let's do some color correction. Let's turn on tone mapping and let's turn on desaturate highlights. And let's make the saturation lower so that the color is not so saturated. Let's see what that looks like in some other frame. Okay, good. And I forgot to mention that in attribute randomize, you need to include seed attribute by ID. Otherwise, particle scaling will not work properly. Let's add a little motion to the camera. Let's add noise to the rotation. We can also create a time shift to make it easier to adjust the camera movement. Decrease amplitude and roughness. Increase the period so that the camera moves slowly and smoothly. Disable time shift. See how it looks in the animation. I think that now the particles have quite a high speed. Let's make retime and slow down the simulation by 2 times. Let's put 0.5 and put post extend so that the animation is not limited to these values, but continues to play. Let's copy the camera so that all the color correction settings are saved and we don't have to adjust everything again. Let's switch off bokeh only, as now we will adjust the general plan. Let's put the camera on top. And yes, like I said, let's make the particles not fall into black so much. Make the fit range non-zero. Okay, let's increase the exposure because the picture is pretty dark right now. And let's do a little movement too. Like making the camera move towards the particles. For better control, let's create a null and copy all the camera transforms. Now before connecting the null to the camera, let's first switch on the option, keep position when parenting the camera. Let's set the key, for example, on frame 80. And in frame 165, move the camera a little forward. Let's go to the animation editor and make all the keys linear. And we'll add a little bit of rotation. Also select all the keys and make them linear. Let's look at the render. Yeah, it's too bright now. Let's reduce the exposure a little bit. And let's set up the third camera. Copy the first one. We'll do an ultra close-up here. Increase the focal length. Let's see the render. All right, let's adjust the focus distance and aperture a little bit. All right, let's do a little animation and put the keys in. And let's do a little bit of focus movement. So let's also put a key on focal distance. Let's go to frame 210 and we'll raise the camera a little bit. And move the focus a little bit further. Let's make the keys linear. Let's add post-process effects. Let's turn on bloom. Reduce these hold so more points start to glow. And we can add streak. It's exactly the same settings, threshold, and intensity. You can play with the values and find the settings you like best. Now you can render it. So, this is what we got after the rendering. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next lesson.